back vibe, baby.
Welcome to the Cup of Joe Show, where we explore the journey of recovery from alcohol and drug addiction. One story, one conversation, and one step at a time. I'm your host, Joe, creating a safe space for honest discussions about the challenges and triumphs of addiction and alcoholism. In each episode, we'll hear inspiring stories and uncover tools that make healing possible. Sobriety is not a one-size-fits-all journey, and you don't have to face it alone. Recovery is possible, and it's worth it. Thank you for joining the Cup of Joe Show. Now let's get started. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Cup of Joe Show. I'm your host, of course, Joe. And today I'm very excited to have my friend as a guest, Richard L. Richard's been sober since January 5th, 2014. Richard has walked through both the beauty and heartbreak of life in recovery. A proud father of two sons, Russell and Will. He's also a dog dad to Angus and Kedgie, and makes his home on a peaceful 2-acre property in Loudon, Tennessee. Richard is the youngest of 4, with 2 older sisters and a younger brother who tragically lost his life to alcoholism. His own path included years of struggle where he only worked step 1 perfectly. He speaks openly about living with social anxiety and depression, and about the profound grief of losing Jan, the love of his life, in 2023. Yet through it all, Richard has continued to put one foot in front of the other, building a life in recovery, grounded in honesty, resilience, and the courage to keep showing up. So grab a cup of coffee, settle in, and let's get into it. How are you doing, Richard?
I'm doing wonderful, Joe. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to share your story with us.
My pleasure.
So tell me, what was it like growing up, Richard?
My parents were both educators. My father was a professor at the University of Tennessee in graphics engineering. My mother was a middle school teacher. She taught home economics, which I think is I believe it's under a different name now in college, but it's still a curriculum. I think they call it human ecology. Had 2 older sisters and a younger brother who used to beat me up a lot. I would let him beat me up a lot because I was afraid I'd hurt him. My sisters are 4 and 6 years older than I am. And my oldest sister is a professor at Elon College, doctor of English. She just retired after 42 years. And my younger sister is blowing in the wind somewhere. She's currently living in North Africa, in Tunisia, with her boyfriend. They spend time in Portugal, and he's from Finland originally. Actually, he's from England originally, but lived in Finland. So she's off and about, and growing up, pretty normal. I was kind of a loner. I had just a couple of buds when I was very young in grade school, and really just a pretty basic middle-class family. My parents were not drinkers. I think my dad might have been a binge drinker, but generally happy, riding bikes through the neighborhoods and all. And I did have a friend whose father bought us beer one time, and drank 2 tall Schlitz malt liquor bulls and got very drunk and threw up. That was when I was probably in about the 7th grade. And about the same time, I watched my father pull a bottle out from underneath the kitchen counter or the kitchen sink and poured a little bit out of it. And I noticed something peculiar after he did that. He took out his pocket knife and put a nick on the label. He was marking the level of I caught onto that really quick. And I thought that there must be something important in that bottle, or he wouldn't be marking the label on it. And so some days later, I decided that I was going to do the same thing, and I didn't have a container, so I emptied out one of my mother's vanilla bottles. She was a baker. And I took my father's T.W. Samuels bottle out, and I poured the vanilla bottle full, and I took a little knife and I nicked the label because I didn't want him to know that I'd taken some, so I nicked the label just like he did, like father, like son, right? And I took it to school because I thought it was cool. And I was standing in the lunch line, and this big fella, I'll call him a redneck for what it's worth. He saw it. He goes, "Give me that." And he took it from me, and he opened it and smelled it. I didn't drink any of it. But anyway, he took it and went off with it. And the next period in class, there was the principal came over the intercom in the school, and they said, "Richard Lyday, come to the office." And I was a nobody, man. So, I was freaking out. I was, what in the world's going on? Well, I got to the principal's office, and there was the principal, and there was that bottle sitting on the principal's desk, and there was that dude sitting across from the principal. And the principal looked at me and he goes, "This young man said he got this from you." And I looked at the bottle, and I looked at the principal, and I looked at the dude, and I said, "I've never seen that son of a bitch before in my life." That was the first time I lied about alcohol that I can remember. And I lied many times later, but that's the one episode that I recall being the first that I got in trouble with. I went on to high school, and back then the drinking age was 18. So, of course, I had some friends. We were able to procure alcohol before I was 18. And we'd go out and listen to some music, but every time I drank any alcohol, I got sick, violently sick, but I'd always do it again. Time after time after time. I can't recall when I was able to drink without it coming back up, but it was sometime shortly after high school. I was able to do that. And I went on to Tennessee Tech right out of high school in Cookeville. First time away from home. Stayed in the dormitory. And fortunately or unfortunately, I got connected with the Lambda Chi Alpha fraternity. And those guys did a lot of drinking. And my intentions and my aspirations turned towards drinking more than studying. And they were a crazy bunch. They were we had a fraternity house. It was just like the Animal House. And there was consequences. I think I made the first F in a class that I ever made in my life because I didn't show up for class. I was out drinking with my friends. And my parents were paying for my school, and I lasted 3 quarters up at Tennessee Tech, and my grades were dismal. Probably had like a 1.5 average, something crazy like that. And it was all because I chose to drink instead of study. And they said, "Well, you're not going to stay. You're coming home. We're not going to spend our money if you're not going to try." So I came back home and started working construction. And my first job was picking up trash on the construction site. I had some friends that were building houses, and they allowed me to get on their crew, and I was a laborer, and I did that for maybe a couple years. Fortunately, my dad had taught me some carpentry skills when I was younger, and I told him that I could run a saw and drive a nail, and I was invited onto their crew, and we had a really good working crew. We built custom houses for a number of years, and that's kind of those were kind of the early years. I was in my 20s by then. Met my first wife through that group. I didn't know anything about romance. I didn't know anything about partnership. All I knew was drinking and drugging, and we were drinking and drugging buddies. And that she wound up being plaintiff number one. We were just drinking and drugging buddies. And I did that for a number of years, stayed with the crew. We were a pretty tight-knit group. Of course, there was alcohol and other substances involved in that group. We were close, though. We would all take vacation together to the Outer Banks in the fall because we couldn't do without one another on the crew. So we would go to the Outer Banks and rent a big house and fish, and it was fear and loathing in the Outer Banks, we caught some fish, had a good time, and I worked in various places. I worked for the city of Knoxville in traffic engineering for a while, and eventually decided to go back and get my associate's degree in electrical engineering technology, which was the best move I ever made. It was at State Tech, which later became Pellissippi State Technical College. And I got an AAS degree with a 3.9 GPA, and that lit the road for my eventual success. I got a job in Oak Ridge, working in a technic. I worked for a company that made the first touch screens for computer terminals, Elo Graphics. I worked there a couple years and got a job offer to go to another company called Tenelec that made nuclear instrumentation that was used in physics laboratories, and I was with them for 9 or 10 years. I did IT work eventually for a big home health care corporation. I've done a little bit of a lot of things in my life. I know a little bit about a lot of things, but not a hell of a lot about anything, and that's kind of been my claim to fame. Which really helped me with my drinking career because I could bullshit with the best of them, if you did it, I knew something about it. Not a whole lot about it, but I knew something about it. But I don't really know when my drinking really started taking off. I met wife number two through some friends, and we drank a lot, mostly beer. But I will say that I never missed any time of work during my drinking career. I went to work with the hangovers a lot, but I always managed to get on site. In my last position, or my last job that I had, I worked for Emerson, and I had worked my way up to engineering status, and I traveled. The company that I did, that I worked for, Emerson, we did machinery health monitoring in industrial facilities, and my forte was vibration analysis. Anytime a company runs their equipment 24/7 for production purposes, including power plants, the last thing they want to do is shut it down for an outage because they lose a lot of money. But if they can schedule outages accordingly through our technology and other people, they could reduced the cost of that shutdown considerably. In the case of a power plant, if they had an unscheduled outage, they're on the grid, so one of their competitors had to pick up the load, and they would gouge them in price. If they could schedule an outage, their competitors, would charge them half the price for providing power to those customers. So it was a good gig, and I traveled extensively across the United States. I did a big job in Chile, South America, Canada, and I was really good at what I did. I really enjoyed the vibration analysis, but I remember during that time on the road, when I started doing that, I was traveling about 35% of the time. And when I gave it up, resigned with a last will and testament, which I did. I wrote a last will and testament to my boss. And I was traveling about 95% of the time. And this was during plaintiff number two. I was gone. We had a son, and I was gone, and she, was pretty much the caretaker. It's hard being away from home when you're married on the road all the time. That was very challenging, but I will say, disease wise, I was allowed to make my own itineraries, and I would not stay in a town that did not have liquor or beer. If my work area was 70 miles away, the closest liquor store or package store was 70 miles away, I would stay 70 miles away in the hotel and drive to my place of work. That was a prerequisite, for me. And I was successful. I look back on it, and it was pretty silly because I went to work pretty messed up a few times and hungover from the day before, and I worked in some dangerous facilities, paper mills and power plants, places like that with huge rotating machinery and lots of danger, lots of chemical danger. And I was lucky to not be involved in any type of accidents as, related to my drinking. I did that
now,
for a number.
Did you think you had an issue? Was there any time during this time that you thought, I'm drinking a lot? Or was it just, hey, I'm going to work, I'm doing my thing, no problem?
I never really considered to have a problem. But I will say at this time that I never can remember one time going to have drinks where I had intentions of limiting myself. Why would I want to do that? Never. I never was I'm going to have a couple beers with the guys. That wasn't me. After through sobriety, looking back on it all, I realized that I always drank more than everyone else. They seemed to be able to put it down, and I was ordering one to go, I had a lot of depression. I've dealt with depression since I was in my 20s, treatment-resistant depression. I've tried every antidepressant you could possibly imagine. They all have undesirable side effects, and none of them were particularly helpful to me. And after the extensive travel, not traveling 95% of the time, I was getting really depressed, and I'm sure the alcoholism didn't help that any. Anyway, I got divorced from wife number two and married again a couple of years later. Still traveling at this time. We had another son, so my boys are half brothers. Will is now 33 and Russell is 25. I will say my older son has been in and out of sobriety for the past 10 years, and I'm really proud of him. He's doing really well right now. He's got a great job, lives in Nashville, bought a house. My younger son is good too. He has some issues, but he's not a alcoholic or an addict. I think they both got some of my inherited depression. It is hereditary. That's been proven. But anyway, she became plaintiff number 3. And I was starting to drink more heavily at that time because the thing that seemed to work best for my depression was alcohol. I self-medicated with alcohol, and it worked, for a while. And the repercussions of that choice started to rear their ugly head, and I kept going back and forth to the psychiatrist. What the hell's wrong with me? I'm depressed all the time, and we talked about alcoholism, and I never once had a doctor say, well, maybe you should consider not drinking. I can't remember a doctor ever telling me that. It's like, well, let's try this new pill. Let's just try this. Nothing worked. I couldn't really stay on most of the medication long enough to get a therapeutic effect. Unfortunately, most antidepressants have some initial very undesirable side effects. I have a very sensitive stomach and had significant stomach issues with pretty much anything I tried. So basically, I was not in a good place. I was tired of the work and tired of feeling down all the time. And I decided to apply for disability, a mental health disability. And that required that, I couldn't earn any substantial amount of money while I'm waiting on disability. Well, it took 3 years. It took 3 years for it to be approved. And once it did, I had an awful lot of time on my hands. Found myself with a lot of time on my hands. And I met an old schoolmate, an old high school, a lady that I went to high school with. And we got together and started dating and basically moved in together. And she had a disability as well, some significant back problems and surgeries and all. And anyway, it was a pretty good relationship, but my drinking got heavier and heavier because I had too much time on my hands, and I filled it in with drinking. And I guess what drove me to get sober is she came home one time and found me almost unresponsive in the lazy boy recliner, and dragged me basically to Park West Hospital, where they took me in, and alcohol blood level of 0.39. The doctor, I remember, he said, "Richard, have you been doing a little drinking tonight?" And I recall I said, "No, sir, I've been drinking a shitload." And he said, "How much is a shitload?" And I said, "More than a little." And that sent me to detox for about a week, and then to a rehab facility up in Kentucky, Lincoln Trail, Kentucky, where I stayed 2 weeks and was tired of their crap. So I checked out AMA 2 weeks out of a 30-day program. And I got out. I thought, well, one of those little bottles won't hurt. Well, that little bottle grew a handle real fast. And, I was trying to get sober for my lady. She wanted me to get sober, and I was not successful, and she was successful at packing up and moving out. So I continued in my quest for sobriety. I think I remember the first. Am I allowed to mention a group on here or anything? I was living in Maryville, and I think my first meeting was at Rockford group. And I remember there's a fellow there, a fixture there, and with steely blue eyes. I won't say his name, but he was a fixture. And he looked me right in the eye and he goes, "You need to put the plug in the jug, son. Plug in the jug." Old country man. And I continued to go to 2 meetings there. I went to the 12 o'clock meeting and the 5:30 meeting. I wound up moving and I found Park 40. And I will go back and say that my oldest son, who struggled with dependency, was living with me, and his drug of choice was not alcohol. And he came at me with a knife one time because I was between the door and his drug dealer. And I said, "Leave the house and don't ever come back. You're a drug addict." And he said, "Well, you're an alcoholic." And I said, "You know what? You're right." I said, "I'll go to rehab if you go." So we both went to rehab, and he stayed, and I checked out in 2 weeks. Excuse me. I'm gonna take a sip of root beer. Anyway, I left, and I remembered what they told me, that if I wanted to stay sober, that I should try to find an AA meeting. I was living close to Park 40, and it was a Sunday, and my son was at another facility in Knoxville. He was still checked in for rehab, and it was visitation day, and I was torn between going to a meeting or going to see my son in rehab. And I said, I better do what they told me to do if I want to stay sober. So I went to Park 40 and I looked across the room, and there sat my son. I could have gone to any AA meeting in town, and they could have brought their little van to any AA meeting in town, but we both wound up there. And that was my first God wink in this program. That I do not consider that coincidence. I think that happened for a reason. I get chills just thinking about it.
I like to think, is it odd or is it God, Richard?
Yeah, man. And I've had a lot of those odd occurrences in my almost 12 years of sobriety. But I started doing the deal, man. I got a sponsor. He told me to behave myself. He told me that not to get mixed up in a relationship. He said, the first year of sobriety, you can have all the sex you want. He said, after that, you can have all the sex you want with another person. And I thought, man, I don't quite know how to take that. but anyway, that's what he said. And I didn't listen to him, of course. But Park 40 Happy Hour became my home group. And I went to a lot of meetings. I'll have to admit, early sobriety, a lot of people say it was tough. For me, it was fun. Early sobriety was fun because I had a sponsor who, would throw me in the car and we'd go do things. And there was a group of us that would go bowling on, one night, and that all kind of started to fall apart, and I missed that. I missed that camaraderie. I didn't get sober to have a glum, boring life, but it's been a little hard here lately. I got remarried. I married the love of my life. Jan had 34 years of sobriety. And we dated for a year, and she moved in with me, and we got married, and I joined the church, and she was a nurse, and life was good. Life was really good. She had an incident at work one day. She worked at a mental hospital, and 2 guys were fighting, and she got in the middle of them and tried to break them up, and she was flung to the ground like a frisbee, and it shattered her hip. She had to have an emergency hip replacement surgery. that very day. Next morning, she was having trouble breathing. She was intubated and went to ICU and was intubated for 5 weeks and passed away in ICU. She got pulmonary embolism from the surgery, and it was just one thing after another. It was heartbreaking. Love of my life. Couple of great stepdaughters, whom I still love and try to stay in touch with. But it knocked the wind out of my sails. And it's been the hardest thing for me to accept. It's been the hardest thing that I've dealt with in sobriety. I've had some dark thoughts. I've had some thoughts about drinking, lots of thoughts. I've had some thoughts about killing myself, lots of thoughts. But here I am. And I tried to step up my service work a little bit. I've had a few sponsees, not very successful. I will tell you a quick funny story. I had a sponsee who sat next to me in a meeting one day, and he reeked of alcohol, and I asked him if he'd been doing a little drinking, and he said, nope, haven't had a drop. And we met outside. I smoked at that time, and we met outside to have a cigarette. And I said, so you haven't been doing any drinking today? And no, I haven't had a drop. And it upset me, man. It so I called my sponsor, and he said, let me get this straight. You're upset because an alcoholic lied to you? And I said, yeah. He goes, did it hurt your tender little feelings? I'm like, yeah, it did. And I didn't realize I had tender little feelings until he brought up the subject, but I do. The old saying, the good news is you get your feelings back. The bad news is you get your feelings back. I used alcohol to numb everything, man. Anytime I was, depressed or angry or, and that's, speaking of angry, that's one thing that I have to really watch out about. I'm not an angry person, but I can't afford to be angry because I know what'll fix that. As much as I hate to admit it, alcohol will always be on my list of solutions because I'm an alcoholic for life. It is clearly at the bottom of my list of solutions. I've learned through recovery that there are other solutions. And one of the things that I've been trying to focus on here lately that I've been sadly deficient at is service. I have a lot of social anxiety, which puts a damper on that. I feel comfortable in meetings because I'm amongst like-minded people, but out in the real world where the rubber hits the road, trying to practice the principles of the program in all my affairs becomes difficult. And, I live in Loudon out in the country. I'm isolated and I like to isolate, but it's dangerous. And, I'm grateful. I'll be honest with you. I've had quite a number of sponsors. As far as working the steps go, the only one I've worked perfectly is step one. I've worked bits and pieces of the steps with sponsors. I've never really sat down and, put down the inventory in black and white like the book says, but half measures has availed me almost 12 years. And, there's something to be said for that. I see a lot of people in meetings and they not only appear, but they say that they're happy, joyous, and free. I'm a little envious of that because I'm not. I'm not there yet. And I think that my social anxiety has something to do with that. I think that I could easily become more involved with some things that, retreats and things like that I haven't participated in. But I want to be happy. I want to be happy. I'm very lonely. Jan and I did a lot together. I do alone okay, but I don't do lonely worth a flip. There's a significant difference, and so it's a 30-mile trip for me to my home group, and the times that I sit here and say, well, I don't want to go tonight, and the times that I force myself to go to a meeting, I always, without exception, hear something that I needed to hear, or hear somebody that is going through the same crap that I'm going through, or the feelings. We talk a lot about feelings. So I feel a part of, when I'm in a meeting. Sometimes when I'm out and about, even in church, sometimes I don't really feel a part of. I can be sitting in a room of 100 people and feel all alone. And I don't have my depression under control. I'm got a doctor's appointment next week. We're going to talk about some new solutions. I've tried a lot of different things, man. I've tried TMS, transcranial magnetic stimulation. I've tried ketamine, which is controversial. But for somebody with treatment-resistant depression, man, I feel you. It's a struggle, and of course, I try to focus on gratitude. I don't like to wallow in my own crap. Self-pity is not a good place to be. I try to get out of it by, at least going to a meeting and sharing in a meeting where I'm at. There's some. I'll say this lighthearted. Sometimes I go to a meeting just for the entertainment. Okay, because it is entertaining. We have some entertaining people in this program, and some funny people. And one of the things that has helped me in my recovery is levity. Don't take yourself too seriously. Try to smile and laugh a little bit, and I do. I catch myself entertained by humorous things, and it's kind of like a shot in the arm. The fact that I recognize that, and but I've still got a ways to go, Joe. I I need to step it up a little bit and participate in. There's a retreat coming up that I'm considering participating in. I've heard it's a good one, and played some golf with the guys the other day. I hadn't played golf in a long time. That was fun. I've got to be careful, with shiny things. I get distracted sometimes in co-ed meetings. I'm kind of vulnerable right now for love and affection because I got a lot of that from Jan, and I really miss it. So I've done a little bit of dating as a widow. It's different. It's different, and I've a couple of times I felt a little bit. What's the word I'm looking for? A little guilty, and I'm a very monogamous person. Always have been, and it's. I don't know if there's such a thing as soulmates, but we were pretty damn close, and it's been really hard. It's been really hard. She passed away on October 25th, 2023. So coming up on 2 years. And I was grateful that I had a friend who lives here in Loudon to take care of my dogs while I spent lots of time at the hospital with her. Um, I don't know why I say this, but I knew she wasn't going to make it after about 2 weeks. You know, it's hard to see somebody that you love laying in bed with tubes coming out of them and they're, you know, not conscious. And I did a lot of talking to her anyway. They say that that's the last thing to go is your hearing. But it's been a struggle, man. It's been a struggle. And is it getting any easier? Maybe a little bit. I'm really trying to focus on learning to love myself. You know, I think it's hard to really fully love anyone else unless you love yourself. And I think that the program of Alcoholics Anonymous has helped me learn to love myself, primarily because I remember one of the first meetings I went to. They said they would love me until I could learn to love myself. Man, what a gift that is, you know, to be a bunch of people amongst a bunch of strangers that say they love you, you know, and they're there for you. And I've never really had that in my life. You know, in high school, my high school was very segregated in groups. There was the blacks, the whites, the freaks, the rednecks, and Richard. You know, I mean, I was on an island, man. I didn't know. It's like the group I was in. Who's got the joint? You know, I mean, whatever. I've always been a bit of a loner, and you know, not that many friends. And now I've got friends all over the world, and I don't know most of them because of AA. You know, and I do participate and try to find meetings when I go on vacation. I've been to some really cool meetings out of town, you know, and go to the beach. I went to one where they over in Edisto, South Carolina, where they give you sand dollars as a visitor chip. You know, it's got their group name on it. I thought that was pretty cool. I went to visit my stepdaughter. Well, Jan and I went to visit my stepdaughter in Tucson, Arizona, and let's go to a meeting. So we went to a meeting, and we get there, and there's these two little old blue-haired ladies in there, and they were the only ones there. And I'm like, well, this is going to be interesting. Until one of them came out with the F word, and I thought, I'm in the right place. Yeah, it tickled me to death. I think she said, let's get this effing thing started or something like that. I had to laugh. It was hilarious. But I've met some really good people, man. You're one of them, Joe. You know, I mean,
Thank you, Richard.
yeah, it's been quite a ride, quite a ride. And I'm going to keep coming back. That's what they keep telling me to do. You know?
Absolutely. Yeah. And you know that you've touched on so many things that I think it's one of the things that I really admire about your recovery, Richard, is that you are very vulnerable when you share, and you share from the heart, and you talk about things like depression, which I was a self-medicator for a long time. Matter of fact, just a couple months ago, I was in a dark place myself, and I couldn't. I was trying to weed off of some medication, and because I just didn't want to be on it anymore. You know, call it ego, call it whatever you want. You know, and had a whole bunch of other stuff going on at the same time, and I could feel myself spiraling. You know, I was gaining weight again. You know, my go-to other than alcohol is food. That's just, you know, and I don't have an off switch. You know, I think that's what we have in common. We don't have an off switch. Whatever it is, we're going to go at it And it's, for me, it's usually something unhealthy, and I'm just going to go at it full bore until it kills me. But luckily it was able, with the help of people like yourself and my wife, and to kind of help me, go to the doctor, which I'm glad to hear you're going, and, get back into doing service work and the program, and, just dive into it head first, because we have a solution. We just don't always use it,
Yeah. Well, taken up, this is kind of minor, but I chair my 5:30 meeting on Thursdays for my home group. I have recently picked up the responsibility of service of intergroup representative for the group. Uh, we have an intergroup meeting once a month, and the intergroup representatives from each group, bring any information that needs to come from the intergroup into the group, announcements, so forth and so on. Not that big of a deal, but it's part of the program. And
I'm going to disagree that it is a big deal. It's a
well,
really big deal for us, Richard. It's a really big deal for you to do that. It's not minor, My wife always tells me that words matter, and when it's not minor, it's a big thing, and it's a big deal for the group, and it's a big deal for you. That's
well,
just
I'm working on changing negative thoughts into positive thoughts. That's a work in progress for me. I down myself quite a bit, and I don't really even realize I'm doing it sometimes, but I have to take little bites, I don't want to volunteer into something that turns out to be a nightmare or something that I can't handle. So I'm kind of going at it a little on the slow side to just do what I can. And
there's that's what we do. We just do what we can.
Yeah.
So what's like a typical day look like for you now? Like, from sun up to sundown kind of thing.
Well, Joe, sometimes I wake up and my eyes open in the morning and I'm like, oh shit, it's another day, but sometimes I have a hard time getting up. But I've got a couple of dogs that see to it that I do. I love my dogs. They're a lot of company, man. And I'm a responsible owner, so I like to, they rule my life, I guess. But it depends. For the past, I don't know, I'm really just now beginning to pull out of a funk from losing the love of my life. I've spent a lot of time in this house during the day, watching TV, doing laundry, chores, housework, picking up dog hair. I do get out and I live in, like I said, I live in the country, and I walk. I've got a nice tranquil road to walk on out here. I go to a lot of meetings, almost every day. And that typically requires driving back and forth to Knoxville. There is a meeting that I attend here in Loudon on Tuesdays and Thursday nights, the Loudon group. There's some people there with 40 plus years. And they're kind of a pain in the ass, actually. They're set in their own ways. Our leaders are but trusted servants. They don't govern. They like to govern, so I just listen to them and laugh, whatever. Respect your elders. That's what I was taught a long time ago. And I think that applies in this case. But it's close to the house, which is nice. We go out to dinner a lot, I meet with the guys at Park 40 on Wednesday evening, which is today. And we usually, it's a blue room group. There's usually, 15, 20 guys, and um, they allow crosstalk. and so, and believe me, there's a lot of it in there, but it's cool. We usually try to go out and get a bite somewhere afterwards, and I enjoy that fellowship. I'm 66 years old, man. I'd like to start suggesting, and I've thought about suggesting, trying to get our bowling group back together. We used to have 10 or 15 people that would go bowling on once a week. You know, I enjoy the activities, the extracurricular activities. It's fun to get out in public with a bunch of drunks, Um,
As long as they're sober, Richard.
yeah, right. That's what I mean. Yeah, and it's kind of interesting. I see other people that aren't, and I'm like, man, I'm glad I'm not like that anymore. That was me. You know, but change is tough, man. Change is a hard thing, and especially when you get set in your ways and start getting a little age on you and habits. And one of my favorite analogies about change is it's about these army platoons out fighting in the trenches, and the sergeant goes, "Gentlemen, I've got some good news and some bad news." They said, "Well, what's the good news?" And he said, "We're all going to get a change of underwear." They said, "Well, what's the bad news?" He said, "Jim, you change with Joe. Joe, you change with Fred." So,
oh God, Richard.
so change is hard, man. That's pretty graphic, isn't it?
Yeah, change is definitely hard. So what would you say if somebody's out there listening right now who maybe is feeling hopeless, and what would you suggest for someone who might be out feeling hopeless right now?
Don't stay at home and watch The Price is Right all the time. Get your ass to a meeting. I mean, that's what I did. They said 90 and 90, you hear that all the time. I was living close to Park 40, and I did a lot more than that, and not bragging on it. I didn't have anything else going on, but, to thine own self be true, it helps me to be around other people. Even if it hurts, if you've got a way to get there, get to a meeting.
Don't suffer in silence. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you wanted to talk about that we haven't, Richard?
I don't know. I'm a little bit here again. I'm being kind of hard on myself. I'm a little frustrated. I've never really had a sponsor for very long, and I've got a sponsor now, and I can't say that I've ever really worked the steps, by the book. I'm kind of an audible learner, and I've listened to speaker tapes. I've listened to the Joe and Charlie tapes, and I don't know. I think if I had any regrets or anything to share, that if you get a sponsor, to try to hang on with them, you know. I know I can't sponsor myself.
No. Maybe, and you mentioned it a couple times, maybe just a suggestion, it's time to work the steps by the book. Maybe something to think about, maybe to give you a different perspective on recovery.
Yeah.
You know, maybe just a thought. You know,
Well,
uh,
I've got a pretty big fear inventory, you know. Um, and then there's the lust issue. I brought that up in a meeting last night. Um, we had a reading from the fourth step out of the 12 and 12, and character defects came up, and the step 4 in the 12 and 12 is pretty heavy, man. And after the reading, there was a long moment of silence, and I can't stand the silence, man. I had to break the silence, and uh, from deep down inside of me and my deepest fears, lust came out. I started talking about lust, and man, that broke up that turned into a great conversation. There was quite a few people that shared on that, and lust is a lot more than just sexual lust. Also, lust for power, lust for money, whatever. But I was referring to physical lust, and um, it's being lonely, being a widow, being going through losing the love of my life. Um, I've been a little lustful, man. And I guess vulnerable. I've looked for something to fill that hole in my heart, and I don't think that's solid. I don't think that's healthy. It may happen someday, but I pray about it. And speaking of prayer, this is a spiritual program. Um, I'm still learning how to pray. A lot of times all I can get out is thank you, God, for keeping me sober today. I have more trouble in the morning getting up and getting my brain, and um, I want to put more emphasis on a morning meditation, however short it may be. Um, you know, um, step 11, sought through prayer and meditation to, you know, get a conscious contact with a higher power, uh, to improve our conscious contact with a higher power. For me, I think anything would be an improvement because I'm not sure that I've ever really made conscious contact. If I did, I didn't know, I didn't realize it, or maybe I just had an unrealistic expectation, of what it would be like. I think the fact that I've been able to, stay off of alcohol, or, remove myself from alcohol for almost 12 years, uh, there's bound to be some conscious contact in there somewhere, because I like to drink, and I haven't. And, there's times when, and I'm glad it says it in the book, that it's the great obsession of every abnormal drinker that one day he'll be able to drink like his fellows with impunity. I'm glad it says that in there because, at some point in time, the obsession to drink, the obsession has been removed from me. It was removed from me. I don't know exactly when it was or when it happened. Maybe it continues to happen. I don't know. But at some point it happened. I don't obsess about it. I don't obsess about it being a solution when I don't feel good. I think about it, man, drink sounds pretty good. I'm an alcoholic, man. It goes in one ear and out the other now. And if nothing else, I'm grateful that I don't obsess about it. That I'm able to not ruminate, not let it get stuck in my head. If it goes in this ear, it's coming out this ear. So, um, conscious contact. and spreading the message. Um, um, I'm speaking at I've been speaking at Centerpoint on Friday night. They have a round robin thing going on over there, and my next assignment over there happens to be on Halloween, so that's going to be interesting. Yeah, I just do a speaker meeting over there. What it was like, what happened, and what it's like now, and it's kind of interesting. My story kind of changes every time. It's all true. My son, that's also in recovery, he's a great speaker. He's an even better bullshitter, but I heard him speak once, and man, I was flabbergasted. This is when he had like 2 years clean, and the first time that I had the opportunity to speak or was invited to speak, I called my son up and I said, "What do I do, man?" He goes, "Dad, just tell the truth." That's all he said. And in my experience, Joe, telling the truth has been difficult at times. So telling the truth, something I've focused on. You may not want to hear it. You may not want to hear it, but you're going to get it. So,
Well, I think you've told the truth today, and I appreciate you sharing your story and your struggles, but also your wonderful sense of humor, which is I don't think you should ever underestimate your sense of humor, Richard. You've got a great sense of humor, and you always make me laugh. You always say something that kind of gets a giggle out of me every time I'm around you. So
can I tell you?
that.
Well, it's levity, man. Can I tell you another quick one?
Yeah.
This alcoholics going through the forest, and a giant grizzly bear is coming off the hill. Man is getting ready to pounce on him, and the alcoholic says, "Oh God." And time stops, and God appears, and the bear's motionless, and the alcoholic says, God says, "What can I do for you?" And the alcoholic says, "Well, just an expression, God. I've never really been a very spiritual man, or certainly not religious, but could you make the bear religious?" And God said, "I could do that. I made the bear. If that's what you want, I'll make the bear religious." So time picks back up, God disappears, and the bear drops from a pounce to his knees and says, "Thank you, Father, for this food I'm about to receive."
Yep, that's a Richard joke right there. That is that's a great way to wrap it up. But I can't let you go before we do our rapid fire questions.
I'm
So,
good.
are you ready? Are you ready, sir?
I'm ready.
All right. What is your favorite recovery slogan?
This too shall pass.
What is your least favorite recovery slogan?
Wow, that's a hard one. Least favorite. I don't know. Keep coming back seems to be the one that keeps popping in my mind.
Fair enough. What do you think is your sobriety superpower?
Um, Faking it till I make it.
If you could say one thing to your former self, what would it be?
Finish what you started.
What song do you play to lift your spirits when you need a boost?
Joe Satriani, Surfing with the Alien. Great air guitar song, by the way.
Nice. If you could grant yourself one wish to help with your recovery, what would it be?
Um, Maybe a genie that I could summon to write my fourth step.
That's a good one. What step do you love the most?
Um, I think step 12. I like to carry the message.
What step do you love the least?
Probably step 9.
What is one of your favorite movies?
Oh, wow. It's going to have to be the Holy Grail, Monty Python.
Nice one. And finally, if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Good Lord, look what the cat's dragged in.
Richard, thank you so much for taking the time today to share your story, man. It's been an honor.
I appreciate it, Joe. It has been an honor. I'm glad I was able to be here, and I appreciate what you do, man. It's awesome.
Thank you, brother.
Marvels of modern technology.
Absolutely. So, and for the rest of you out there, please subscribe to our friends at thedailyponderables.com, your recovery source for inspiration and encouragement every day. A new episode of The Cup of Joe Show is released every Thursday at noon. Visit thecupofjoeshow.net, or you can listen to the show on your favorite podcast apps, Podbean, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and others. Just search for The Cup of Joe Show. Don't forget the "the." Please like, follow, subscribe, and share because someone out there needs to hear this today. Have a good day, everybody.
It's just a laid-back vibe, baby.
We hope you enjoyed today's Experience, Strength, and Hope. We are so grateful you decided to join us. Please share this episode with someone who might need it. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. Remember, no matter where you are in your recovery journey, you are not alone. Reach up and reach out to someone. Please do not suffer in silence. Until next time, let's take it 1 minute, 1 hour, and 1 day at a time. Thanks for listening to The Cup of Joe Show.